money will be at the Altium site further to the west down the road.
Okay.
So there will be state money that goes into this project above and beyond what the state has already committed to the Riverway corridor.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have. Any other discussion? Is there a motion to approve? Second. Hearing none, Mr. Garrett.
Mr. Goble? Aye. Mr. Critchlow?
Aye.
Mr. Gray?
Aye.
And Mr. Jordan?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Next item in your packet is just a monthly report from Cogent Industrial Partners. Cogent is our development partner on the IEC. One of the activities that they've done in their moving ahead is they have taken all the options for the properties in IEC Site 2. And so they're working with us as we look at a couple of prospects. They would control the land. So it's not a situation where we're holding those options and having to deal with the option agreement. So continue to be a partner in our process out there. And so just wanted to give you their monthly report. Item 3 is at our last meeting, we talked a little bit about the budgets and things going on in the budget. One of the things that we'd like to do is ask for your support of a CRISI grant. And we've done a couple of CRISI grants, and I can never remember, it's a Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvement Grant by the federal government. In this particular case, this CRISI grant would be to improve and rebuild the bridge at the South Shore tracks and US 20. So where you go under the tracks as you go into New Carlisle, there's 2 bridges, one owned by Norfolk Southern, one owned by South Shore. This would replace the South Shore bridge. Right now, this is the last bridge on the entire South Shore network that doesn't meet a 286 ton requirement. And so 286 tons would allow them to move steel, would allow them to move heavier product than they currently do today. It would also be done, the bridge replacement would be done in such a way that as we look to do a train station or as we look to do other rail improvements on the passenger side, those improvements would be done. We'd never have to go back in and improve the bridge at a future point. The other piece, and there's a drawing in the packet, the bridge would actually have the underside widened. Right now, there's about 25 to 30 feet of under width between the bridge. By putting this new bridge structure in, it improve the bridge area out to about 55 feet. So they'd either be able to do road improvements or add a trail or other things to allow connectivity from the north side to the south side of the tracks. So long-term, a great opportunity. The CRISI grant program is an 80-20 match, but typically to get an award in that program, you need about a 50-50. You need to bring your numbers down. So in the past, when we'd applied for this grant before with South Shore, we had been in for $750,000. South Shore asked if we'd come back at that amount for an opportunity to do a $750,000 piece of the project on what ultimately will be about a $4 million bridge replacement. Huge opportunity. South Shore owns a bunch of land between Smilax and Walnut, and if they get the award, they're going to become more active in the marketing of that because they really can't market it because of the bridge weight limitation. So if they had the opportunity to do development with the heavier bridge, it opens up new opportunities. The other side, with the improvements being made now with the contract awarded to DLZ to improve the track all the way to the west side of the airport, this opens up the opportunity for areas around the airport to see rail service, freight rail service that it doesn't see today. Again, this bridge is necessary at a heavier weight to make those improvements. So we'd ask for your approval to support this grant in the amount of $750,000. We'll have money in the budget, but it's a good win. We were part of a CRISI grant with Elkhart and Western Railroad over on the east side of the county for a couple of rail crossing improvements. So it's a great way to get federal money back into our local community to do these kind of projects. So we just ask your support.
You just explain again, for us putting up 750, who are the other parties putting up?
So South Shore is going to put the South Shore Freight will put in the majority of that. NICDID will put in
Majority of what?
The match. So we'll put in 750. NICDID will put in, or South Shore will put in they're in for 1.5 million. And then NICDID will put in for 150,000. I believe are the 3 partners that as they've looked to get to about that 2 million mark. So we would have other people that would have money into this too. So
with all the improvements being done in the bonds passing and everything for the South Shore, why isn't there money in that to cover everything? So why are they coming to us
So this bridge is actually owned by South Shore Freight as opposed to NICTD, who all the other bonds have been for. So all the double track and all that is NICTD, who owns the rail, but they don't own the bridge.
And they're only putting in 100 some thousand.
Right. Because they're gonna end up also bearing the cost to put the rail across the bridge and the new Canton area and stuff like that. So they're gonna have other costs in, but as a matching partner, that they're in for a portion, but not in for a proportional portion, so to speak.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Hearing no discussion, Mr. Garrett.
Mr. Gobel, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Critchlow?
Aye.
Mr. Gray?
Aye.
And Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is resolution 2022-2025. This is a resolution that was heard, the MOU portion of this resolution was heard earlier today at the 8:30 meeting of the Drainage Board. So again, as we look at projects, the Altium project development agreement required, one of those projects was drainage and stormwater management improvements specific to the Nespajani ditch and bed corridor on the Altium site. So what we have done is, as we have worked with the Drainage Board and the Surveyor's Office, there's a process through state law SEA 386 that allows for a consolidated timeline and consolidated process to do stormwater management improvements and ditch reconstruction and ditch management. So what we have asked the Drainage Board and the Surveyor's Office to do is, as we move forward with this project, the Nespajani ditch improvements, ask them to manage the project. It takes about 1.5 to 2 years of work out of the timeline because it allows for better coordination of contracting entities and things like that. So what we'd ask for your approval to do today is approve this resolution, which approves the MOU for that agreement. Now, as part of the MOU, there's a contract with Lawson Fisher, who has been our partner to do the ditch management. That contract for all the ditch design and permitting and all the other coordination pieces is a not to exceed amount contract of $442,800. So the redevelopment commission would pay those contracts through the Drainage Board and through the Surveyor's Office, those contracts. So this is kind of the second piece of professional service, second of 4 pieces. The 2 other pieces are water and sewer that still will have to come through the redevelopment commission at some point over the next couple of months as we move forward with pre-work on these projects.
Are we comfortable that that bid is fair?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we've had it checked internally. We've had it checked by a couple other firms. And because the Surveyor's Office has managed it, they've contacted a couple other firms to make sure all the line items are correct. And so one of the things I would note on the contract, because it's a not to exceed, there are milestone points. So if the project changes, if the project doesn't move forward, then we only have spent and only done work to certain milestone points, so that we aren't out the full amount if the project doesn't move through the full amount. So the Surveyor's Office feels comfortable with the contract. Again, they'll be managing it. And we are in a transition. We'll have a new surveyor after the first of the year. But surveyor staff will remain in place, and staff will actually be the one that will manage the project. So we believe this is a great opportunity to do this and do this right.
So it has to be, the ditch has to be moved no matter who the developer, we talk about that a lot, right? The ditch has to be moved.
So the ditch needs to be moved, and originally the whole concept was we'd move it to the west side of the site, it would get it out of the west side of the site, it would do all these things. What it did though is that it put that piece of the Nespajani into a different ditch as it went under State Road 2. That ditch ultimately then came back into the Nespajani, but it also then went into a whole other network. By keeping it within the same corridor, and the concept here is pushing it to the northeast corner of the site. So it basically squares out the site. We have the ability to do a 2-stage ditch, so it's a better ditch structure. It's a cleaner ditch structure. It does more for ecological restoration of the water that goes into it. But it also then allows for drainage for the IEC site too to come into it, because the sites then connect together. So it actually saves us money down the road and improves ditch quality and all those things by having a better designed ditch. So at the end of the day, yes, any project that comes in, we'd actually talked with Altium a lot through their site planning. Could the ditch stay? Could you design around it? And it cut, no matter how you do it, it just cuts to the side. It's such a weird angle that it needs to be moved. But pushing it to the corner is really the best because it really works better for grades, works better for the elevational changes. We're actually, as part of this, Fillmore Road, which will be the main entrance into the site, we're designing the improvements, the water, sewer, gas, and electric improvements, so that it'll be under the new ditch elevation, so that all the utilities will be put in once. We don't have to come back in and move utilities or anything like that. So it really is a thoughtful approach for a good solution to this project.
So we need it moved. We need this surveyor to do it.
Right,
He doesn't have the money to do it,
right,
and the drainage board has to approve it.
right.
So that's really what we're paying for, what we need them to do.
Correct.
Okay.
And then to be eligible for this program, the SEA 368 program, they have to manage. So,
Oh,
and it has
okay.
to be managed through them as the state or as the local governing agency that does drainage and ditches and things like that. So,
I don't pretend to be an expert then, but if we're putting a sea of concrete and then in the middle of the square, which is what 40 acres under a roof is going to be. Is this, I mean, I'm just asking, is this gonna be able to handle it? I mean, I grew up out there and it's like, this isn't huge.
well, and so as we do drainage to get to a release of controlled release, it does.
I'm sure they know what they're doing.
Yeah, so right now they propose a huge, again, part of the challenge out there too is groundwater's high. So you gotta go
Right.
wider with the pond. You can't go deep, you gotta go wide. Feels like a song. But so part of that is compounding the water or impounding the water so that it can be discharged at a controlled rate. By putting the ditch in a new corridor that better is suited and meets all the better requirements, it's a better way to do it.
Yeah, like I said, I just trust they know what they're doing, but it's a lot of water.
It is a lot of
Suddenly
water.
not going into the ground.
Yes.
I don't have anything else. Thank you.
There a motion to approve resolution 2022-25.
So moved.
Second. No other discussion, Mr. Garrett?
Mr. Cole, how do you vote? Mr. Critchlow?
Aye.
Mr. Gray?
Hey,
And Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Have these packets next time. Find the next one. Resolution 2022-26. So over the last several years, we've worked with the Bishop family who live at 56150 Larison to have conversations with them about what the future of their property would be. They have gotten to a point where they understand that we're basically going to tear up Larison. We're going to tear up the intersection of State Road 2. We're going to build a big factory in their front yard. We've cleaned up the site in green just to the south of them and by cutting down trees and clearing the site, it's increased noise to the corridor and things like that. They're one of two properties, them and the property immediately to the north that have direct access to Larison. So they will see tremendous conflict over the point of construction and reconstruction of Larison, things like that. They've asked to have us consider acquisition. This property is not on the acquisition list of the new Carlisle Economic Development Area. So what we do is do like we've done on a couple other occasions is approve funds for the purchase of the property, and then the Board of Commissioners would buy the property. So what we'd ask for you to do today is approve this resolution 2022-26, which would move 118,000 plus 40,000 in relocation to allow the Board of Commissioners to buy this property. The family's been fantastic to work with. They've just kind of come to the point where they're just ready to move on. And from a safety standpoint and all those kind of things, it's this is a property that just, having the residential out of an industrial area is just kind of a good mix. So we would ask for your approval of this resolution.
So the intersection, it would tear up some of their property.
So we also anticipate as part of the work that's going to have to be done, Larison Road, Larison Boulevard, through there is a concrete section of road built original to the project. It's going to need to be widened to a 3-lane section and probably just what they call white topping, so they'll put a new concrete layer over the top of the existing roadway. But the road, if you drive that section, the road is split apart. The center seam through the whole corridor, is at least a tire width, if not a little bigger in depth. So the whole thing just needs to be reconstructed. So we're gonna have weeks or months of repair in front of their property north of the intersection, and also be, pretty.
Because is the plan to still move trucks down Larison to two?
Yeah, so everything, all the truck traffic would come to the intersection. Of
So it'll all be.
So everything that comes through there now, plus everything that will come through there. Will
And that's
come.
how they'll get to the toll road?
They'll either go west to the toll road or they'll go east to the toll
Sure,
road.
okay.
So yeah, the truck traffic in front of this house will increase.
Significant.
Significantly, yeah, so again, we just ask for your support of this resolution to acquire the property. The property, if we approve this here today, the same resolution goes before the board of commissioners at 10 o'clock today. So,
We acquire it or does?
so board of commissioners acquire, technically, board of commissioners do, the redevelopment commission manages the site, so.
So they can transfer it to us later.
Yep.
Motion to approve resolution.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, hearing none. Garrett.
Motion is second, Mr. Gobel.
Aye.
Mr. Critchlow.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mr. Jordan.
Aye.
Motion carries.
In general.
So there's 3 professional service agreements on the agenda here. The first is for Capitol Avenue. What we've done is one of the pieces of the project is a leg from on Lincoln Way from Capitol Avenue West to Brook Street. What we commonly call a State Road 933 and Riviera Drive Improvement Project. As we have worked through to get that ready to go out to bid in the spring, some additional cost in coordination with the city and NDOT. NDOT's going to do a project about that same point in time. So what we need to do is amend the contract, add some additional time and cost in to get the plans bid ready so that we can coordinate with Mishawaka improvements that are going to be made and coordinate with NDOT improvements that are going to be made. This contract amount addendum amendment is in the amount of $13,500, brings the total project to $43,000. And we would again anticipate this would go out to bid in March this year to move this project forward. So any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Is there a motion to approve the professional services agreement?
I move it.
Second.
A motion and a second, Mr. Gobel.
Aye.
Mr. Critchlow.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mr. Jordan.
Aye.
Motion carries.
The next 2 items on the agenda relate to 14380 East Douglas Road. 14380 East Douglas Road is not I guess it'd be 2 houses away from a property that we are in the process of closing on right now. A couple of months ago, we came to you and asked to approve 14440. That's a property right at the tracks and Douglas Road. This property has been on the market since August. It's no occupants. It's one of the properties that's been identified that'll need to be required for these Douglas Road improvements. We don't anticipate any other properties in this area coming onto the market immediately. So that'll give us some additional time to do design and development of a corridor plan, something that we'd like to do in 2023. What we'd ask for you to do today is approve appraisals in the amount. So the first one would be with Appraisal Services, Inc. in the amount of $550. The second proposal, because we're required to get 2 independent appraisals, would be with Irish and Grove in the amount of $600. And so would ask for your approval for the 2 appraisals to appraise this property, please.
Question, I'm looking at the diagram here. Who owns that middle parcel?
So there's a private property owner. I believe the last name is Jordan that owns that. And so at some point in time, we'll either need to buy a certain amount of right of way from them or buy their entire property, depending on the design of the roadway corridor that goes through there. The 2 properties on either side, one was a vacancy due to death, and the other one is just a vacancy because it's fallen onto hard times. It was on the sheriff's sale for a period of time. It's been vacant for a period of time. So again, we don't have to pay relocation if there's nobody in the house. So it's kind of an opportune time to buy. So
Is it our intent then to continue to move east buying property?
So the intent, well, so we have two challenges. One, if you look at the drawing, so we don't own, while there's a road, while Douglas Road is in this corridor, we don't actually own the right of way for the whole south side of the road. The right of ways go to the property lines go to the middle of the road. So at some point at best, we would have to acquire the right of way to get the right of way corridor on. You can see where it starts to gap about 4 properties east of the tracks. And this is common. This happens all over. We have this all over the county. So we'd have to acquire at least the right of way out the front. The other thing we would do, again, as we start to plan for this project, is identify where we could buy property on one side or the other and move a driveway. So if you look at the house that would sit in the middle of the 2 properties, the driveway sits on the right side of the property. So if there's an opportunity to extend a driveway east through other property to expand a piece of property, maybe it's an opportunity that we sell surplus property to the adjacent property owner. It allows for some design flexibility too. So now, I don't know that I'd want to live with a 5-lane roadway corridor in my front yard, or if there's an overpass. So I mean, some of those considerations come down the road. But it just opens up some flexibility as we look at this. We probably will only need, and again, connecting endpoints. We've identified 5 properties on the south side of the road that we need. These are 2 of those 5. So you can see about, if you were to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, kind of 6 over, there's kind of a U-shaped driveway a little further to the east. That one could see some significant impacts just based on the way the drive sits and where the house is located. So, but a lot of the road improvements would happen just based on the way Mishawaka built the road and the way Capitol Avenue, the western part of that Douglas Lake already sits. A lot of those takings would be on the south side of the road. So it works out largely to our benefit.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve both appraisals. Mr. Gobel, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Critchlow?
Aye.
Mr. Gregg?
Aye.
Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Resolution 2027. Again, this is all putting all the pieces of the card together, and now these are all the things that go into the budget. Resolution 2027 would be a budget appropriation of funds for the average of the 2 appraisals to acquire this property. If the appraisals come in at a reasonable value and we opt to move forward. So again, much like the one that we did on Larison, Board of Commissioners would need to buy the property instead of the redevelopment commission. So what we would do is get the average of the 2 appraisals and then provide funds to the Board of Commissioners to buy the property at such time as everything was received.
There's a motion to approve. I will make the motion. Second.
Motion and a second. Mr. Gobel?
Aye.
Mr. Critchlow?
Aye.
Mr. Gregg?
Aye.
Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Motion carries.
So the last item under E in general is probably one of the best pieces of news on the agenda. So Mullen Automotive has moved forward with their purchase out of bankruptcy of the Elms site. If you remember all the weird transactions, so Elms was leasing property on a land contract from SF Motors, who had the redevelopment commission's property under control. As part of the deal, the first piece of the deal, Mullen bought from SF Motors the land rights to the parcel. And then once all the land rights were under control, then they bought the entire site out of bankruptcy. So they own the assets, they own the R&D, they own any product, they own all those pieces. It is our understanding that the next step for Mullen will be to build the Mullen 5, which is a kind of a sports car, electric sports car. And then also Bollinger Automotive, which is one of their many umbrella companies. They would build trucks. So they would build, it would look like small diesel size trucks and delivery trucks. The Elms vehicles that were built there likely will be built now in their Mississippi plant. They own a plant in Tunica, Mississippi. And so that facility would be where that vehicle was made. There were some requirements that they couldn't build that vehicle in Mishawaka at that site. So they've somewhere else if they choose to build it at all. So we're excited. That moves that project forward. We also have another opportunity on the other side of the fence with AM General. AM General is looking at doing a pretty sizable expansion here with some new equipment and new building improvements. So we're excited about that. So to have those two pieces next to each other with activity would be very exciting. So we anticipate a good 2023 on Insight. So if there's any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer them. So last thing on the agenda, real quick, I just wanted to circulate. So part of what we have done, the county has received ARPA funding or American Rescue Plan Act funding. So we applied for a number of projects. When I say we, the economic development group applied for 5 projects. Out of that request, working with the town of Lakeville and town of Walkerton, they both had utility needs. So they had a couple of projects there, one being a water tower and new water lines in Lakeville. Walkerton had some need to do design for a couple of sewer and water projects. We also applied for funds for the Shirley Hines Land Trust. Shirley Hines Land Trust they built the Leidig Bog, or they're developing the Leidig Bog. This is actually a much larger project in coordination with the Airport Authority on some work that the Airport Authority is looking to do. So that's kind of an exciting piece. And then the Southwest Fiber Conduit Loop, much like we built the fiber to New Carlisle, this would build a fiber conduit loop to Walkerton. So it started at the casino, go all the way to Walkerton, and then build a piece from North Liberty over to Lakeville to connect into an existing fiber loop on the Choice Light network. So they would build a redundant loop and then would take a leg all the way to Walkerton, which ultimately could be extended to Plymouth to finish that bottom loop and then have a second redundant loop. So we've asked for this funding. Total request is about $11.1 million. We estimate that the projected investment, if those were approved and all the other investments were made, would be about the $25.3 million range. So a lot of other economic development projects going on we don't talk about, but this is one I just thought I would share with you. So
Thanks for sharing this, Bill. Why not the railroad bridge? Our portion of that.
So it was one of those where you couldn't use that funding to double match. There were some
easy answer.
Yeah, unfortunately. I mean,
Can't use their money to apply for their
right.
money.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so there were, and originally when American Rescue Plan money came out, it was for, health and safety things, a couple other things, but then water, sewer, and fiber were kind of the 3 highlighted projects. So the majority of these tied to those elements. So, but again, I just thought I'd share those with you, just what else was kind of going
And
on.
just because on the agenda, the Wyatt Northwest Cleveland solar project, there's no report.
There is no report by those areas. I would know, and we've had conversation about this with some others. There's a huge gasification project happening in Wyatt. So there's a company that's going to come in, build a gasification plant, basically take gas out of the landfill, turn it into a different type of gas, then resell the gas. It's about a $30 million personal property tax type project. So likely we'll seek property tax abatement in the spring of next year to build the plant, but that will sit within the TIF district. So it then begs the question. So we'd had the opportunity to collect increment from it, but is there a project out there to collect increment for? And so so is it one of these where maybe it's just time to close down the Wyatt TIF if we've met all the project goals and everything? So that's something we're going to look at after the first of the year, kind of as that project's being proposed. We're collecting money, but if we've done everything we said we were going to do, then why don't we just close it down and turn the money back into the general fund and back into the taxing units to have them benefit. So that'll be something that we'll look at as part of the work next year. So.
There's no questions here. I just have one other item of business. I've gotten contacted. Bill, could you just do like a 2-minute summary of what Project North Star is? Some folks have seen it referenced and they're not familiar with.
So Project North Star is the state's project name for the Altium Cells project.
Okay.
And so it just, when the state puts out projects, I don't know how many hundreds of projects we've had this year. They've got a naming convention, and that was just the name that they used for that.
No,
project.
there was just some confusion about it, so I said that.
Sometimes we name projects, honeysuckle.
Yeah, sure.
We name, probably not the best name, as but and sometimes the state has gone through the Disney names, they've gone through Marvel characters, they've gone through about
You
everything.
came up with honeysuckle.
I
That's a
don't,
good name.
I'm gonna blame Chris, so.
That's a good- he's not here.
But some people say, well, I was an invasive species, so maybe not the best, you know,
Oh.
so, I don't know, you know, I don't know, it's.
One of the reasons he's gone.
Exactly, yeah, exactly.
It's terrible, man.
Kicked
It's
in
gotta
the
go.
gut, so, yeah, him and the name, so, but no, so that's what it is. And it's just as a general update, we have regular conversations with General Motors and their team. It is a situation where their union negotiations in Ohio probably were a little more complicated and took longer than they thought. They announced the project in Tennessee at their Spring Hill, Tennessee plant. And that plant now would be the same size as the one being proposed for our site. But every news article said, and a fourth plant to be built in Indiana, fourth site to be a new Carlisle. So it's very active, very fluid. And again, all the work that Phil is doing in particular, and Lawson Fisher's doing with the property issues to get it as clean as possible are an indication that after the first of the year, we anticipate an announcement. So.
Relatively soon after the first of the year.
God, I hope
I mean,
so.
always.
Yeah. Yes, yeah.
Because nobody really knows it.
Well, right, and that's where we are too. So I mean, we're lining up all the pieces, but we haven't been given a date or anything like that. So it's getting there. Now we know that they're going to take 2 weeks of Christmas. So it's one of those that when do all the pieces come back together? So, but I will tell you, Allison back here, she sharks every website, every social media. She knows every move that everybody from GM is making on it. So if anybody's gonna know first, it's gonna be Allison. So,
I have a
It's looking good.
I have a piece of business. We had talked about this months ago, and I'm still frustrated with it. It's the way we do professional service agreements. We had talked about as a commission having a minimal amount that below which we didn't have to put out for bid, and above which we would have to. Several of these that we've seen have been 6 figures, okay, with people that we know, all that, but there's no way to really be sure that the rates we're being charged and those types of things are really market. That one contract showed individual hours. There were multiple ones over $200 an hour. Okay, and without taking out your abacus, that's over for $200 an hour person is basically $400,000 a year in salary if they were for us. Okay, the market is what it is, but I think we have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that anybody who does business with us has their pencils sharpened. And I just feel like if a couple of these companies, any of these companies get in the door with us, then it's almost fait accompli that we'll always do business with them in this project. And there's no way to control their costs about how they go things up. I know, Phil, we talked about this, is what can we do to get more accountability in that area?
Well, the board is free to create a policy for professional services if it so chooses. It is not required by state law, but the board could select to create a policy on that if they so choose.
I think we were going to check to see if anybody else has something like that, either at the state or local level. There's some kind of policy.
So within the county, there is no professional services policy that is set by any other boards.
Anything in the city?
I did talk to the Redevelopment Commission Council, and they do not have a similar, any policy like that,
Anything at the state?
not that I'm aware of.
and we did check with the Indiana Economic Development Association, and nobody has. And a lot of those agencies that are involved in that are private agencies like the Elkhart Economic Development Agency, an outside private organization. So a lot of the groups that belong to that are kind of outside the general government umbrella, but nobody has anything like that they generally work from.
We'll put together he's got the Excel file. It might have been a meeting you weren't able to attend, but he's got a listing of contract amounts.
Right.
So you can glance, you can see at a glance where a big one like this falls and would a policy like that pose some sort of burden on the economic development staff to determine your amount. So Bill wanted to circulate that again for everybody to think about.
And certainly update it and circulate it. Yeah, we can do that.
Again, I just feel like we have an obligation. We look at a contract and it's figures. That looks right. What the hell that mean, right? Well, it's number of hours by the type of person times the rate. The rate is the variable and the estimated hours is the variable. And I feel like we're not doing our jobs as a commission if we don't spend some time making sure that those rates, mostly the rates, are what they should be for doing business with a public entity, right? And I don't feel it here. What do you think, Dave? I mean, am I off base?
No, I mean, we probably should have something. I know we had the county engineer caution us that they've had use that project or that process somewhere in Michigan, I think where it's from, and didn't work well if your sole basis to have the lowest, but certainly there's got to be some way that we could have an overview. We're kind of in a unique situation. A Lawson Fisher we worked with for 12 years, 15 years. And even though someone may be cheaper, their hours would have to exponentially increase to get the knowledge base. But certainly we can talk among ourselves, try to come up with some parameters. I mean, it would have been helpful if anyone had a policy like that.
Is there a policy or a law that you have to, when you put something out to bid, it has to be the lowest bid, or is it based on how you
No.
set out the RFP?
Professional services is not required to go out for bidding under Indiana law.
So it'd just be what the best, lowest, whatever you.
Whatever you so choose.
Yeah, we just suggest that if there's ever a slow meeting, we put on the agenda, discuss it, and in between we could come up amongst ourselves.
So,
Some
as you break this down and make sure we focus on the right things, the amount of the contract is one thing. But what happens is as they look at a project, anybody, it says it's going to be these amount of hours from this many people, and here's how much I'm charging you per hour. Those variables, even if we're always going to go with the same guy, are things that we all need to see so that we can say, look, we want to go with you, but you're charging $250 an hour for an engineer and everybody else is charging $100 or $125 an hour. That's where I'm going with it, okay? Because those are those little things where nickel and diamond, pretty soon the taxpayer is paying double what they should. And how would we know? You know, because you look at 100,000, 400,000, that looks okay. You know, we got to look at the meat underneath it. Enough said. Okay.
I appreciate it. Any other items? Okay, so we are at the public comment.
Dan Caruso, 205 Conklin Street.
I didn't think I had to say anything.
Actually, I just have a comment and then a couple of questions. I don't know if Bill can or is able to answer these. And let me ask my questions and you enumerate them, because if I start doing them one by one, I'll forget what they were. Do we expect the bridge in the New Carlisle to be shut down, and for how long during when they're going to upgrade put the
5 days.
total of 5 days?
That's what they anticipate.
Okay. Is there any work schedule? Are we looking at? I'm glad to see that things are being taken care of at Larison too, because that is a crazy intersection. But another crazy intersection is Timothy and 2. I have quit using that intersection. It is a nightmare because it's a blind hill. They come up over that Bendix Hill and all of a sudden there's 20 vehicles coming at you. And you're stuck in the middle because all of a sudden there's 20 vehicles coming this way. And that's a school bus road. And I hope we're going to pay a lot of attention to that. Has there not been at least informal discussion about Larison Road, where the property was acquired, where the second house will likely be acquired, to redirect Larison Road to the northeast and Larison Road coming from the north to the southeast to join over there by Snowberry Road and connect with Smilax up to 20 to make it a straight through thoroughfare?
We looked at that. The cost was exponentially more expensive than the return on the investment. So, and just the amount of utilities that would have to be relocated and things like that. There wasn't, at the end of the day, Lockmuir Group had done the first parts of the study. They got to a point and NDOT agreed and we all agreed that it just didn't have the value.
Okay.
I mean, it would have been a $50 or $60 million project that would not have had a net return. So,
And finally, the Altium project, in Lordstown, Ohio. I'm glad to see that Altium walks the walk, that they allow the organizing drive in there. And I say that speaks well for their intentions here. So I know I've been a little critical of them seemingly dragging their feet, but you don't know what goes on behind the scenes with these things. But I'm glad to see that they finally followed through on their commitment to do that. I'd say that's positive for whatever's going to happen here. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other comment online or?
I can't make connection with Murphy. And the other one's me. I was just testing the system.
None. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Motion is second, Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Fischler.
Aye.
Mr. Greif.
Hey.
Mr. Jordan.
Aye.
Passed.
And we'll do the signatures.
I will sign
DocuSign.
DocuSign this afternoon. So thank you very much for that. I have to run